My name's Todd Agnew. I teach in the Media Arts and Worship Department, and I would like to introduce you to our speaker today in case you did not come yesterday. I have information. Dr. Reg Grant has recently retired as of July 1st as the chair and senior professor of the Department of Media Arts and Worship at Dallas Theological Seminary. He also served as the director of the Master of Media Arts and Worship, Master of Arts in Media Arts and Worship degree program at the seminary since it began in 2011. But he's been teaching here since 1977. I can see some of you are like, 19? Yes. He has also served on the board of directors for Insight for Living. He's authored a lot of things and written and acted in a lot of things. His things have won lots of awards, but the things that are important to him, you will hear about. One, we want to recognize his wife, Lauren, is here with us today. And if you talk to him, he will talk about her. He will talk about his kids and his grandkids, to whom he is Pop. And for a while now, I've called Reg a dreamer. He thinks things are possible that just don't occur to me. But even as I was thinking about what to say this morning, I realized that that wasn't the right word. He is a dreamer, don't get me wrong, but he's a believer. He believes in his God, but he believed in me. And what I have found talking to students, to graduates over the years, is that's what they have come away with. They learned all kinds of details. They learned all kinds of skills. But Reg saw something in them and believed in what God was going to do in and through them. And he believes in you. He believes what God is going to do in and through you. And so I would love for him to share that this morning. Please welcome Dr. Reg Grant.
Good morning. How are we doing? Yeah, good. All right, good. It's good to see you all. Thanks, Todd. Very gracious introduction. And thank you for the Media Arts Department and all the guys and gals that are there that have welcomed me. Thank you, man, Patrick, for that beautiful rendition of Be Thou My Vision. Wasn't that marvelous? Just a great, great rendition of Be Thou My Vision. I want it played at my funeral, with bagpipes. So hopefully it'll get done. Okay, I left you hanging a little bit yesterday with regard to what happened with Rosalind. Remember I said that she had been diagnosed and the doctor said prepare for the worst, and then all this other stuff happened and intervened, and they did the biopsy, and the biopsy was inconclusive. And so we entered the hospital on the day of her surgery. Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. We entered her surgery not knowing. And the doctor came trotting out of the theater, the surgical room, and as I recall, he still had his mask on. And he said, I just wanted you to know that the tumor on her right arm, as big as a golf ball, was benign. And it was encased in nerves. So the real tricky part was how do we excise this without causing permanent damage to her arm? And he said, it was a miracle. We cut all around and through and between the nerves and removed the entire tumor without even nicking a nerve. And she bears the scar on her right arm as a testimony to God's presence, his immediate presence with her, with the doctors. This is what she looks like now. You saw her when she was 17. God continued to unfold the blessings for us. She wound up marrying John. There they are in the bluebonnets down at the ranch. And together with them, we celebrate these two boys. There's Johnny. He just turned 13. And that's Evan. He just turned 11. And then to cap it off, as if we could do any better, to cap it off, they gave us Charlie. Oh my goodness. She is just the sweetest thing. You just fall into those brown eyes, don't you? It's just amazing. She's just turned 5 and started kindergarten. So she's on her own adventure now, sweet Charlie. Yeah. Teach us to number our days. Kids and grands will do that. They will help you number your days. I'm bad at math. But the Lord is really good at reminding me to count the days of blessing. One of the things that I did when I was back in the 70s, and Don Regier, my dear friend, Don, was kind enough to hire me as a writer, and I started producing stuff for the seminary, is we decided to do a little show called I Can See Them Now. It's sort of a historical retrospective on the history of the seminary. And he said, go over and talk to Dr. Walvard, who was president at the time. Dr. Walvard occupied a room in Davidson. I'll show you that in just a second. But it was I was quaking in my boot. I mean, I had not had an interview with Dr. Walvard before. He's a very imposing man. I went in and I shook his hand and I sat down and we sort of hit it off. And as much as you could hit it off with Dr. Walvard, I did. And we were talking and I said, I'd like to do an interview. Could I get the records of Dr. Chafer? And Dr. Walvard said, oh, they were all burned. And I said, I was just nonplussed. I said, burned? Dr. Chafer's records, all of the archives? And he said, yeah, they're gone. He said that was one of his last wishes, was that anything having to do with him, personal data, records, diaries, anything like that, would be burned because he didn't want a big deal done about him. And I said, well, okay, I guess. Thanks for your time. And I interviewed him a little bit and said, I got a few notes, but it wasn't anything definitive, no hard copy stuff. So I stood up to leave, and I went to the door, had my hand actually just on the door handle, and he said, hey, Reg, wait a minute. I said, yes, sir. He said, I remember, now this is the late 70s. He said, I remember back in 52, I was sitting here, and I was looking out my window at where that red arrow is pointing there. This is a picture of me being made up as Dr. Chafer, and I'm sitting in the place where Dr. Walvard was sitting when I was interviewing him, which also just happens to be Dr. Chafer's old office. So Chafer and Walvard occupied the same space. Walvard was looking out that window to my right. You're looking at a mirror image of me there. And he was looking out this window on the right-hand side of the screen to this area right here. Now, if you've never noticed that, you need to go over and take a look at that. Those are stairs. There's a stairwell going down outside of Chafer. There didn't used to be a gate on it. But Dr. Walvard said, I remember back in September, October of 1952. This is the 70s. And he's remembering back to a specific day in 1952. He said, I remember seeing Dewey Duncan, our registrar at the time, and he was carrying a big box. And that big box, he carried it over to that area there, this, see if I can point to it, this area right here, and he went down those steps, and he disappeared. And carried another box or two down. I didn't think anything of it, never asked him about it, but you might go over there and just poke around. Go over to Mike Reese, he's heading up what we used to call the shop, and ask Mike for the keys. And he'll give them to you, and just go on down there and poke around, see if you see anything. Maybe something's down there. And I said, okay. So I went and got the keys from Mike. I went down those steps, went in the door wasn't locked. Went in the door, I had the keys, but didn't need them. The door wasn't locked, went in, and cobwebs were everywhere, pipes, just junk. It was just a nasty mess, and there was nothing. There were no boxes, there was nothing. So I thought, well, man, I came all this way, why don't I just poke around a little bit? So I went to the back wall, cinder block wall of the old Chafer, and I looked, and to my left was a big air conditioning vent that went up at an angle, like at 45 degrees. And there was this little narrow crawl space that was about this high and about this wide. And if you bent down like this, you could crawl back in there to that wall. So I crawled back to that wall, and it's a cinder block wall, and there's about this much space between that cinder block wall and the shaft that was the heating and air conditioning vent. So I get to that wall, and it's dark. There's no light down there, and I didn't have a flashlight. So I'm crawling along in the dark. So I get to this wall, and I hit the wall, and it goes to my left, so I'm going down the wall. And I'm feeling, and all of a sudden I hit this raw area. It's a hole in the wall that's been like knocked out by a sledgehammer. It's real rough. So I'm feeling all around this hole, and it's about this wide and about this tall and about that high off the floor. And I thought, I've come all this way. So I put my hand in there, and it's dark. I have no flashlight. This was not cell phone time. I mean, there was nothing, no light. So I'm feeling around in there, and it's all dirt, and it's rat droppings, and it's gross and awful, and there's cool air coming from inside this thing. And so I step up. And I'm in a three-piece suit, because we wore those back then. I'm in a three-piece suit, and I'm crawling around, and I stand up, and I'm feeling along the wall. It's pitch black. I'm feeling along the wall, and I feel a light switch. And I think, there is no way in this world that I would flip that switch and a light would come on. Light comes on. That light hadn't been on since 1952. And there before me are two or three, I can't remember if it was two or three bookcases about this wide, about this tall, and about 6 feet long, filled with the archives. All of Chafer's memorabilia. Old medicine bottles. I mean, just diaries. I immediately went over to the library and got my buddy Tim Demme, who was a historical theology major, because I knew as soon as anybody in power found out that Reg Grant, first year nothing, had discovered the archives, it would be the last day that I ever saw the archives. So I got Tim, I said, just follow me, don't say anything. And so he comes over to Chafer with me. We go down into the basement, and for days we sat there and we read every scrap of paper, everything that we could get our hands on. There was even a list of people that Dr. Chafer did not want to succeed him. Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't know any of those people. I do now. None of them, by the way, made it. So Tim and I went through this stuff, and I'll just tell you one thing that we found that was so cool. We found a series of diaries, about this many diaries, beginning in 59, because I opened the diaries from his father, Thomas, all the way up through Chafer and his last days. So I looked at the one in 1859, and I found this one entry, and it said, I think this must have been Thomas's. I remember they were up in Ohio. And he said, went to the Green today to witness the debate between Mr. Lincoln and Mr. Douglas. And I was like, why I'm holding this in my hand? And so I thought, okay, 1859, 1860, 1860. So I go to 1865. And I go to April, which is when Lincoln was killed. Page. May, June, something like that. Went to the Green today, same words, same author, to view the funeral cortege of President Lincoln. His funeral train was stopping in that town, and this person was going to witness the funeral cortege of the recently slain president. We have that. I went up and told John Hanna about it, and he said, we're starting the retrieval today. And they went down and they pulled everything up and put it in Charlie Dyer's old office, which was in Todd, which was new back in that day, crammed everything into his office. God shows up in unusual circumstances, unanticipated ways. He's given me the privilege of serving him, not just here at DTS and in discovering him in the archives, so to speak, but in foreign countries as well. This is one that just, to this day, I can't get past. If you remember these 5 men, if you've never read Jungle Pilot or one of the other series of books about these guys, this is Roger Youderian, that is Pete Fleming, Jim Elliott, whose diary is so famous, Nate Saint, and Ed McCulley. Those men were all martyred in Ecuador back in 1956, January of 56. And for many years, I wanted to do this story. I wanted to shoot this story on the Kudurai River, on what they call Palm Beach, where the men were martyred. Had been wanting to do this for years. A friend of mine named Fred Holmes, who was my director for the films that a number of the films that I did, was also interested in doing this story. It was just a great story, and it changed missions in the 20th century. It was, Fox's New Book of Martyrs said that there was no martyrdom in the 20th century responsible for sending more people, encouraging more people to go to the mission field than this one, when these 5 guys were killed. So we tried and tried, couldn't get permission from the families. There were 5 families involved. We couldn't get permission from the families, and it was a real frustrating situation. So we finally gave up on it, and I had tried to get in touch with Rachel Saint, who was the person who was still down there after all these years. Rachel was born in 1914, and she was still down there in the 80s doing stuff, going in 2 weeks in, 1 week out. 2 weeks in the jungle, 1 week out, back in Quito. And so as the Lord would have it, I started working with Our Daily Bread Ministries, and they wanted to do a film, and sure enough, they wanted to shoot it in Quito, not knowing of my connection, my desire to shoot this. And I said, oh, wow, this is great. Okay, well, let's go down there, and maybe I can get an interview with Rachel. Well, of course, when we went, and we were shooting my film down there, the film that we were doing for Our Daily Bread, she was out of country. She was down in the Amazon, doing her thing at Tonyampari with the Auca, or as we call them, the Waorani. And there was no way to get a hold of her. So what happened with us in our filming was that we shot, got it all done, got up to the last couple of days, and we didn't know there was a woman who was, it could have been a man, it doesn't matter, woman's inconsequential, but it was a person who was running the program for the high school students that were being provided for us. And she decided that she was going to teach the Westerners, it was in her plan all along, a lesson that we couldn't come down and teach them, show them how to do things. And so she reneged on her promise to provide these students on the last 2 days of the shoot. We don't have those students, we don't have a film. So Fred, our director, comes to me, not Fred Holmes, another Fred Hollis, comes to me and he said, well, what are we going to do? You're the theologian in the bunch. How do we handle this? And I said, well, we just pray. What else are we going to do? We could have made a big stink about it, but it would have ruined it for any other missionary groups that came through and wanted to film. So we decided we just pray, we leave it in the Lord's hands. We prayed together. We prayed for about 6 hours or so, and up in a Jeep, this guy comes roaring up and he says, I think I found a new location. We're not going to need the kids. We'll be able to do it. We just need to rewrite the end of the script. And we said, okay, let's go. So we jumped in the Jeep, we head out, and he said, by the way, I need to stop by this missionary house on the way up. So I just need to tell you, we've got to stop. I've got to talk to these people. And I'm thinking, we've got 10 minutes before the sun starts to set, and we've got to get a shot, and I'm rewriting the script as we go. And you want to stop to talk to him? Yeah, got to do it. I said, okay, all right, fine. So we go in to this missionary. It's beautiful. It's overlooking a valley. It's got like 2 or 3 side-vented volcanoes coming out. Quito is a beautiful place. It's the most temperate city in the world. It's just gorgeous. And so, yeah, amen, right? So we're there, and I'm pacing. I'm just pacing. I'm going back and forth. I'm just, what am I? Lord, you got to help me out here. And I hear the name Rachel being spoken behind me. And I thought, now, there can't be that many Rachels in Quito. So I turned around and I said, you weren't talking about Rachel Saint, were you? And they said, oh, yeah. And I said, really? Well, I heard that she's out of country. And the guy said, well, she was. But they had an unexpected storm. And she's back in town. She's back in Quito. And I said, no, really? I have had a dream for years. Is there any way that you could get me in touch with her? Any way at all? And he says, I think so. And I said, where is she? Where is she? And he said, downstairs. She was in that house. She came up. We talked. She said, Reg, I have not allowed anybody to come in and shoot a documentary on Palm Beach ever since 1956. And a lot of people have asked, a lot of people have tried, but I believe in what Our Daily Bread is doing. You guys are going to get in. There's Rachel, down in the jungle, down in Tonyampari. She's born the same year as my mom, 1914, just a couple of months before mom was born. She is a dear, courageous, wonderful, 160 or 70 pounds of pure gristle. That woman is tough. She introduced me to Gikita, who was the lead killer. He was the one and pastored the tribe after coming to Christ later. And then I met Kimo. That's him standing at a pulpit. All of the killers, 5 killers, 5 victims. All of the killers came to faith in Christ. One of the killers wound up baptizing the daughter of one of the men he had killed in the river where he killed that man. Lives were transformed because these men were broken. And the Lord started to teach them to number their days. Chemo, I was out talking to him one day, and he made this for me. This is a spear. And I know what you're thinking. Yes, like the ones they used. Because they didn't have guns, they had spears. The 5 missionaries, there was at least one gun. They didn't use it. They could have killed these men. They didn't. They gave their lives on the end of a spear. This is ironwood. Really hard to break this spear. I want you to keep that in mind. Chemo gave that to me. I'll have to tell you sometime about how I got that back into the United States on an airplane. It was before 9/11, let me say that. So we go down to the beach, down to Palm Beach, and we're scouting it. You know, you scout an area before you shoot it. So we were down scouting it, and Diuma, it's a matriarchal society, so Diuma's queen of the village. Her house, her hut has to be higher than any other hut in the village because she's queen. And she's down there, Rachel and Dawa. Dawa was the wife of Chemo. And all of a sudden, Dawa comes running up to me, and she's chattering in Waorani. I don't know Waorani. And Rachel comes over, and that's her talking to Rachel. Rachel comes over to me on Palm Beach, and she said, Reg, just don't say anything, just listen, and I'll translate. She's only told this story 2 times since 1956. So, and she said, I have no idea why she's telling it to you, but I'll translate. On the day of the killing, the men who had been killed were all in the river, having been speared to death. And these men went back. They were afraid because of a false report having been given to them that the missionaries were what's called kiwudi. Kiwudi are river demons. And they were told that they were river demons, and river demons cannibalize you. They were going to cannibalize the tribe. And so to protect the tribe, they went out and they speared these men. And then they went back and brought their families, they brought their wives, their children out to witness the brave act that they had done in killing these men. And Dawa is telling me, I told Chemo, and Chemo's standing right beside me. She said, I told Chemo, don't kill these men. They are innocent. They have done nothing. They are not kiwudi. They have good news. Christ. They have good news. Don't kill them. And while she's saying this, she's hitting Chemo. Say, isn't that right? Isn't that right? And Chemo's going, yeah. So he's agreeing with her that this is what happened. And she said, as soon as I told him, she said, this is wrong. Then all of a sudden, from the river, there arose kiwudi, where the men's bodies were. And they hovered over the river, downriver, just downriver. And she said they had instruments, some reeds that they were blowing into, some with vines on them that they were doing this and making music and singing a song. And we all fell down on our faces. All of the killers, none of the other people except the killers and their families saw this. All of the other people, think of Saul on the road to Tarsus. All of the other people heard a sound, but they didn't see anything, and they couldn't have articulated what they heard. She said, we were down on the ground, and as soon as we looked up, because the sound went away, and they were gone. And I asked her how they explained, and she said, we don't know. We think they were angels. Now that they are believers, They were singing a song. I was leafing through Jim's diary from a few years before, 4 years before, 1952. July 26, 1952, 4 years before he's martyred, and he says this, "Oh, for a faith that sings. Lord God, give me a faith that will take sufficient quiver out of me so that I may sing over the Aucas, Father. I want to sing." His prayer was answered in the song that floated above the waters of the Kudurai outside of Quito. The Waorani collected an offering after they became Christians, and they asked the missionaries to go get some. They wanted to give Rachel a gift. She'd been with them for so long. And so they pooled their resources, having sold trinkets in the villages and so on, gave it to the missionaries and asked them to bring something back. So they brought back a little pendant, and they had given Rachel the nickname Nemo. Nemo means star, because a bright morning star will arise in your hearts. 2 Peter 1:19, Revelation 22:16. Jesus, bright morning star. And in the pendant, they have a picture of a spear that's broken with a star in the middle. That's Rachel. She wore that pendant to her grave. Rachel died on the day that I buried my mother. I climbed the windmill down at the ranch and looked over, and you can see the flagpole with the flag waving just above the grave of my mother about a mile off. And I thought, I'll bet that Mom in heaven greeted Rachel as she arrived and said, "You knew my boy." And Rachel would have said, "Oh, you must be happy. I've heard so much about you." And they would have talked. I'll tell you a real quick little story as just another evidence of God's being in unusual places. This is Rachel's dad, Mr. Lawrence Saint. Now, you've probably never heard of him, but he is a master of stained glass artistry. And he was doing a stained glass to represent the different parables. And one of them was the story of the feeding of the 5,000. And he used to bring everybody through the living room and paint them before he would create stained glass. And he worked and found everybody that he needed, except he couldn't find the boy. Had trouble finding the boy. And Mrs. Saint was getting tired of all these kids traipsing through her living room. And she said, "What are you looking for? Just tell me." And he said, "I'm looking for a child in whom there is no guile." And she said, "You're looking for Nate." And he said, "You're right. That's Nate Saint, offering to the Lord Jesus his small, seemingly inconsequential offering, just like the grown-up Nate offered him his life on the Kudurai. And watch God take it and multiply it to bless generations. Okay, two more really quick things, and then I'm done. You need to learn to count your days. I've done a study of the actuarial tables tell me that I have about 759.2 weeks left before I kick the bucket. And so I told my kids that, and what I did was I took marbles, and this represents half. This is 376 marbles are in here. This is half of the number of weeks according to the actuarial tables that I have left. 1 week, 1 marble per week. So every Saturday, you go in and you take 1 marble. That's your Saturday marble. Kids wrote on this, Daddy's Saturday marbles. Someday I'll lose all my marbles. And they're coming out one at a time. Little marble, and you put it in your pocket, and you carry it around all day. That's what you use to invest in your family. It's a reminder to count your days. Count your marbles. Count your days. Number them. Let God teach you something about that. This is it. This is the end. I need to show you the one who has helped me number my days. This one here. This is my sweet girl right about the time I met her, when she was 17. And if you can imagine a young version of me, a young Romeo, that's me. I was smitten. And I want to give you the last little tidbit of Shakespeare, if I may, in closing. It is a speech from Romeo to his Juliet, but it applies to Lauren and me, but soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Lauren is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Her vestal livery is but sick and green, and none but fools do wear it. Cast it off. It is my lady. Oh, it is my love. Oh, she knows that she is. See how she leans her cheek upon her hand. Oh, that I were a glove upon that hand, that I might touch that cheek. Two of the fairest stars in all the heavens, having some business, do entreat her eyes to twinkle in their spheres till they return. What if her eyes were there and they in her head? Her eyes would, through the airy regions, stream so bright that birds would sing and think it were not night. It is my lady. It is my love. Thank you. For helping me number my days. Count your marbles. Number your days. God bless you and thank you.